it's Penny here, and today I am finally going to be filming the second half of my March reading wrap-up. In March, I read 25 books. It was way too much to talk about in one video, so I did the first, let's say 8, because I grouped some things up in the first video, and today we're going to be talking about the second 8. I know that 8 and 8 doesn't make 25, but I've grouped some to make it easier as well. The other thing is I will be doing this book battle style, which means I pair up all the books and I battle them against each other until we come to the champion of the month. Now, carrying over from the first video is Magic for Liars by Sarah Gailey. That was the best book from that group of books, and so once we get the champion from this video, we'll see which one is really the champion of the month. As usual, I have tried to group the initial battles so that you can go to the timestamps below and jump to a particular section, but my groupings aren't necessarily that great. I do have a couple of science fictions, both shorter science fictions, but then I had to group a manga with another science fiction short story. That doesn't work. But then I do have a couple of short story anthologies and also a couple of graphic novels, and that's where I grouped things up. I promise you the maths does work. It does add up to 25 in total. But anyway, let us get into round 1 of the second part. It doesn't matter. We're talking about books. We're battling them against each other. And first up, we have Remote Control by Nnedi Okorafor up against Finna by Nino Supri. So firstly, Remote Control is set in a futuristic Africa, kind of a dystopian, in some ways a utopian. Basically, it's Afrofuturism, and we're following this young girl who gains this power, and because of this, she becomes known as the goddaughter of death. And pretty much she goes traveling around looking for something in particular, and she can basically make anyone do anything because they're so afraid of this power that she has. And so she gets them to give her things, forces them to let her stay with them. And I guess that might sound good, but also she's just really struggling to deal with this power that does have this death-related aspect to it. It was a really strange story, but I really enjoyed it. I really loved going on this journey with this young girl and seeing all the awful things that happened to her, but also how she dealt with them. And there is also like a magical fox type creature. Was it a fox? Whew, it's been a long time since I read this now. And also a cat for a little bit, but like warnings for animal deaths. But this one is also a strange one because on my reading of this, I read this physically and I would give it 5 stars. I loved it. However, then because I loved it so much and I happened to have the audiobook on hold at the library, I decided to reread it via audiobook straight away, and the experience was so different. I knew straight away it was not going to be great because I didn't like the audiobook narration style. It was a narrator that I've listened to before and not enjoyed, but honestly the reading experience was so different. I thought that on a reread I would pick up on all sorts of things that I would really love, but instead I just spent the whole time trying to work out why the narration style wasn't something that I liked. So I don't know, I wouldn't recommend the audiobook, but I have seen some people say that they love the audiobook, so I don't know. But I think I still give it 5 stars because I read it physically. I loved it. It was really dark but also kind of sweet. I don't know. I'm just going with that I loved it. Then next we have Finna by Nino Supri. So this one is about these 2 furniture store employees who have just broken up, but they end up having to work a shift together. And unfortunately on this shift, this grandmother happens to go through this like interdimensional portal. But because this is a regular thing that happens in this furniture chain, the company sets them up with what they need to go and search through all these different dimensions and find this grandmother. So they set off on this journey and they come across all sorts of different versions of this furniture store in different worlds, and it's kind of dangerous, but also they're trying to work through their relationship. And I'm a little bit conflicted on this. I thought it was very creative. I really liked reading about the different worlds, but unsurprisingly I didn't really like the relationship stuff that much. There wasn't too much of it, but it's quite a young YA story, so the romance was not for me. But also, once we got about halfway, we kind of fell into this action section, and I didn't enjoy that bit quite as much. And I also don't know how I feel about the ending. I can definitely see that it opens up the potential for a lot more to be written in this same world, and I do know that there is another sequel that I don't think follows the same characters but is set in the same world, and I kind of hope that it will end up including some of the original characters. But I guess if it comes to battling these two books against each other, well, I did enjoy Finna. I absolutely loved Remote Control, or at least when I read it physically. I just think the character explorations in Remote Control were so much more in depth and the themes were so much stronger. So for those reasons, I'm going to put Remote Control through to the next round. Then our next battle is 4 volumes of The Girl from the Other Side by Nagabe up against The Time Machine by H.G. Wells. This is a weird pairing, but we'll work through it. So The Girl from the Other Side is the series all about this young girl who is being looked after by this scary demon type creature. Basically, there is this curse that the demon creatures have on them that's turning them into these demons, and so everyone that has been cursed has been thrown out of the city, and the city is basically locked away trying to keep safe. But why is this young girl wandering around being looked after this demon? That's what we're learning about. I am glad that I read a bunch of these together because I feel like each volume doesn't really give me enough of the story to satisfy me. But reading it in chunks, as I have in March and also in April, has been really enjoyable. It's kind of hard for me to remember exactly what happened in volumes 3 to 6. But regardless, I just really love this. It's both really cute but also really dark and creepy, which is just a mix that I really enjoy. And there are some parts that are just like so heartbreaking in the things that are happening because everybody's trying their best, but it's just a horrible situation. And I really love this too. So putting this up against The Time Machine, actually I was reading this edition, which is The Time Machine and Other Stories, so a collection of short stories, The Time Machine kind of being the longer one at the beginning. But to be honest, I didn't read any of the other stories because by the time I pushed through The Time Machine, I had no stamina left for forcing myself to read things in this more classic, older style of writing. So if you haven't heard about The Time Machine, it's this classic story about a man who creates this time machine and goes traveling through time. I will say the first chapter, I thought it was amazing. It basically gives this theoretical description of time travel, and I was totally convinced from it that time travel is definitely a thing. However, then this man who's telling all his friends at the dinner party that he has traveled through time, he goes traveling into the future and he meets the future of humanity, and he has all sorts of theories about it, many of which turn out to be wrong. But basically, most of the stuff that happened in the future I found incredibly boring and I didn't care about it. I found a few of his theoretical discussions to be interesting, but the actual plot of what was happening in the future, it just went on, and it wasn't interesting. It wasn't the twisty kind of time travel stuff that I tend to like, which, I mean, I guess is fair enough if you think of this as kind of the foundation of talking about time travel. Expecting it to be twisty was probably a bit too much of an expectation. I guess maybe it was a tiny bit twisty right at the end, but the majority of the story was just about what he found in the future, and I was really bored. I was so sad that I was bored. But I do think just for that first chapter, I am really glad that I read it. I do really love time travel, so it was good to understand a bit about the foundation of that concept in literature. But yeah, I just, especially that old classic writing style, I'm not good at reading it. I find it really difficult. It did kind of remind me of Edgar Allan Poe. And maybe I should listen to it in audiobook form, because I did get through a lot of Poe in audiobook form and I did enjoy it that way. Maybe at some point I'll try some more H.G. Wells in audiobook form. But anyway, for now, I think battling these two books against each other, it's not really two books, it's 4 books in one book against each other, but regardless, battling them against each other, that first chapter of The Time Machine was strong, but for the overall experience, I have to go with The Girl from the Other Side, which I just really loved. Okay, next up we've got our 2 short story anthologies. So we've got Purako up against Pixel Juice by Jeff Noon. So firstly, Purako is an anthology of Maori myths retold in a modern setting, or at least retold by Maori authors. I think some of them were still retold as myths or more in the past. Some of them were definitely told in a very futuristic way. I think I liked the ones that were told more as myths more. So maybe I need to actually just search some actual Maori myths to read. I did enjoy learning about the different Maori mythology, although I did realize once I read it that I know a lot more Maori mythology than maybe I would have thought I knew. And there were some short stories that I really loved in this anthology, but there were also some that were absolutely bizarre and I didn't enjoy them at all. They weren't necessarily badly written, but just some of them had really cool concepts, but then they took it in such a direction that I was like, what the hell is going on? I don't even know. But I do think if you have an interest in Maori mythology, then this would be a good anthology to pick up. And also I do plan to read some more things by some of the authors because I did really enjoy some of them. Although I will note my favorite stories I think were Maori authors that I've already read other things by. Then the other short story anthology was Pixel Juice. I have had this for a really long time. My sister lent it to me, gave it to me. I need to check whether she wants it back. But this is another one where it's just short story anthologies. You have this thing where there'll be some that you really love and some you really hate. I mean, I guess more end up being just in the middle, but for Pixel Juice, it tended to be either I really love them or I really hate them. They're all kind of these futuristic stories, science fiction short stories. A lot of them are very dystopian. Some of them were really beautiful and I really loved those ones. Some of them were really weird and I hated them. There was a lot of like glorification of crime. One all about this young boy becoming a pimp. There were some just I hated them. So that was a shame. Some of them were so terribly written I could barely read them, or at least they weren't a style that I liked. But it was so frustrating because some of them had really amazing ideas and like some of the short stories were linked together. You could tell they were set in the same world, or some of the same ideas would be revisited in other stories. So there was a lot to like about this book, but some of the stories just were not good. I wish I could just pull out all the ones that I actually enjoyed and like have an anthology without all the other ones. But unfortunately, that's not a thing. So, if I'm going to battle these two anthologies against each other, I am going to choose Pūrākau because I feel like there were less stories in that one that I hated. And as well, I learned a lot about Maori mythology while I was reading it. Okay, then our next battle is our graphic novels. So I read volumes 2 and 3 of Giant Days, and I've read volumes 4 and 5 of The Wicked and the Divine. So Giant Days is just a really fun graphic novel series about these 4 girls who are going to university and having that college experience. I think volumes 2 and 3 were still their first year. I just really love this graphic novel series, and I don't even understand why. It doesn't have a lot of the stuff that I normally like, but somehow it makes me feel very nostalgic for that university experience. All the girls are just really fun, and all the challenges they're dealing with are really relatable. It's written in such a fun way. There's a lot of humor. There's a relationship that I ship very strongly, and I don't know, I just really love it. So if you want a really fun graphic novel series about girls going to university, maybe try this one. The other graphic novel series has a very different vibe, so it's The Wicked and the Divine. In this series, basically every 90 years, I think 13 people 13? Am I just making up numbers? Maybe. Anyway, some number of people, teenage people, will turn into gods. While they're gods, they will be worshipped and treated like rock stars, or at least this is set in modern times, so they're treated like rock stars, and it's a really great experience. However, they also know that they're only going to live for a few years and then they're gonna die. So that's a little bit traumatic. I have to admit that at this point I don't really remember what exactly happened in volumes 4 and 5 because I have now finished the whole series. This is the problem with doing wrap-ups too late. I will link my vlogs where I talked about them in more detail somewhere. But regardless, I just really love the art style for this, and I think a lot of the aesthetic and just the vibe of the whole thing, like the character design and the color scheme, is just really amazing. Sometimes I feel like the plot is not entirely as strong as I would like it to be, but there is still an interesting story, and I'm willing to overlook it not being perfect because I really like the characters and the art design. Like honestly, you can just look at the pretty pictures and I think you'll enjoy it, or at least it's the art style I enjoy. And of course, like I said, there's gods dying and all sorts of battling against each other, and also just at the same time a little bit of teenage angst, which doesn't sound like something I'd like, but I like the way it's done in The Wicked and the Divine. So battling these against each other, wow, that's really hard, because the Giant Days, I love it. I've just been enjoying reading them so much, but like Is the plot amazing? No. Is the art amazing? Not really. It's good, it's bright, but it's not that amazing. The art in The Wicked and the Divine is amazing. The story is very creative and interesting, but like I am more attached to the characters in Giant Days than I am the ones in The Wicked and the Divine. I think that's partly because in The Wicked Divine there are so many gods, and while we're primarily following one girl, as the series goes on you kind of are following more of the gods. Okay, so I just looked at my spreadsheet where I rate things against different criteria and average it together, and Giant Days has an average of 3.6. The 2 volumes I read and the 2 volumes I read of The Wicked and the Divine have an average of 3.7. So, because I have no idea how to make this decision otherwise, I'm just going to go with The Wicked and the Divine going through to the next round because it got 0.1 more, which is probably within the margin of error, but whatever. The Wicked and the Divine goes through to the next round. Okay, then I think we'll call this the semi-finals, maybe? So we've got 2 battles. Our first one is going to be between Remote Control by Nnedi Okorafor and the 4 volumes that I read of The Girl from the Other Side by Nagabe. Both of these are very dark, but also have some characters that are very sweet and kind of innocent, although the stuff that happens to our main character in Remote Control does take her innocence away, whereas I feel like The Girl from the Other Side, at least in these earlier volumes, she was still very innocent and sweet. Not that I think that has an influence on which one I like more. Which one do I like more? That's what I'm supposed to be trying to think about. Oh, no, I'm making this more complicated than it needs to be. The winner for this battle is definitely Remote Control, just because I had such an amazing experience reading it. I really love the characters, I love the themes, I think the world is so creative, and while I do enjoy The Girl from the Other Side, the stories are very simple, and those 2 volumes, 4 volumes? How many volumes? 4 volumes. Those 4 volumes didn't really get me that far into the story, and they did make me feel emotional, but Remote Control also made me feel emotional. So definitely I'm putting Remote Control through to what we're going to call the finals. Then for our next battle, we've got Purako up against The Wicked and the Divine, and I feel like it's not really very fair to have to battle a short story anthology where I didn't like some of the stories, even though I did really love some, up against this book that just is eye candy. So my brain automatically goes, I like the bright and shiny things, let's go for the bright and shiny things. Whereas Purako, obviously a book published on more of a budget, the cover art isn't even that beautiful, but these battles shouldn't just be about the cover art. They should be about the content. I just think it's really hard for a short story anthology to win a battle. I think I'm gonna pick The Wicked and the Divine just because overall I enjoyed the whole thing more, whereas Purako, there were just some stories that really let it down. Yes, I guess that's my decision. So I'm gonna put The Wicked and the Divine volume 4 and 5 through to the finals. So let's talk about the finals. We have got Remote Control by Nnedi Okorafor up against volumes 4 and 5 of The Wicked and the Divine. And even though I said The Wicked and the Divine was eye candy and it's hard to put something up against something so beautiful, firstly, the cover art of Remote Control is really beautiful, so it can compete on that level. As well, I just really love the story of Remote Control. I love the character, I love the themes. I already said all this. I really loved it, so I'm gonna put Remote Control through to the what's after the finals, nothing. But we do need to put Remote Control up against Magic for Liars, which was the winner from the first part of my March wrap-up. Although I can't say I'm super excited about this battle because it is way too hard. Pretty sure I give both of these books 5 stars. I love them both. I love the exploration of the characters and the worlds were really interesting. I haven't talked about Magic for Liars in this video, but maybe I just try and hint to you that you should go and watch the first part if you haven't. But basically we've got this girl who is a private investigator trying to solve a murder at a magic school where her sister teaches. And I really loved it. I found the characters really relatable and I loved the way that the plot came together. And there were some interesting themes. All of these things are also true about Remote Control, although maybe I found Remote Control to be a little bit less relatable just because the character is younger. It's still, I would say, an adult novel, maybe? Maybe it doesn't matter so much about the target audience. Like, a lot of people could read that book. There are some dark themes to do with death though, so be careful with that, I guess. But the character is younger, so, and going through an experience that is completely unlike an experience you would ever have. So like, from that perspective, less relatable. However, The character in Magic for Liars I found really relatable. Just she's an older woman dealing with questions about whether she could have had a better life if things had gone differently, and I guess that's something that everyone wonders a little bit when they get older. Okay, I've resorted to my spreadsheet and I can see I did give Magic for Liars a slightly higher rating because of the writing style. I did like the writing style a little bit more. I found it just a little bit more easily digestible. I thought it was very slightly paced better, and also another bit of a bump because I related to the characters more and they felt a lot more real, I think, but that's partly because of the setup of the books. One is set in a much more realistic world, whereas one is more out there. Anyway, I recommend both these books, but I think for picking the champion of the month, I am going to go with Magic for Liars. I really loved it. I love both these books. You should read both of them. But Magic for Liars is the champion of the month. So that's going to be my reading wrap up. Do let me know if you have read any of the books that I talked about today, because I would love to talk to you about them more down in the comments. Or also let me know if you're interested in reading any of them. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. I hope that you are doing well, and I will see you next time.